Salam, shalom, and peace. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Israel Brief. I'm Rolene, and we're proud to bring you the news from Israel and surrounds Monday to Thursday on this platform, sponsored by Lay of the Land. And if you want to get your news updates, simply look for our YouTube channel. You can find us at the Israel Brief. Click on the big red subscribe button for your daily updates. But let's go to Washington, and I think we all have a bit of a peace hangover this morning in Israel. Incredible history in the making yesterday as Prime Minister Netanyahu gathered with US President Donald Trump and representatives from Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates to sign in the historic Abraham Accords. And we think that Abraham himself would be very proud to see his descendants millennium later signing these historic agreements in front of nearly 700 people gathered to witness this event. Major historical moment for Israel, because in the last 72 years Israel has only made peace with two other Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan, and in the last month two Arab countries normalizing their relations with Israel and saying that this won't just be a peace, this will be a warm peace. And incredible moments indeed. So let's unpack those accords and let's take a look at what the contract actually says. The accords speak about the goodwill, the cooperation, the recognition mutually of the peoples of the region, the working together in various fields, and the working together with mutual respect and cooperation for a peace in the region. But what is interesting is how the Palestinians feature in these particular accords. In the past, the tactic has very much been to give some criteria how Arab states envision a future Palestinian state. However, in the Abraham Accords, it basically gives very vague reference to a Palestinian state. There is no mention of a two-state solution or East Jerusalem or settlements or any of the obstacles that many claim are in the way to making peace. Very interesting, that observation. And in yesterday's Times of Israel, a UAE high-ranking diplomat saying that it is now time for the Palestinians to help themselves. And you can find copies of the Abraham Accords. They are available on the White House website for you to have a look at the criteria of the peace agreement. But in a very moving ceremony just before the signing happened, President Trump handed a key to Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying, "This is the key to all our hearts. You have the key to all our hearts." Very moving indeed. And representatives from the various countries spoke in moving speeches to those gathered. Prime Minister Netanyahu alluded to those who have paid the price of war welcome the great peace that will come. President Trump also alluded to 5 to 6 other Arab countries that will join the ever-expanding circle of peace soon. And after the signing ceremony, he increased that number to between 7 and 9, and also hinted that we could perhaps see Saudi Arabia join in the ever-expanding circle. One thing that I do find very interesting is that at yesterday's ceremony, both the ambassador from Sudan and the ambassador from Oman, two countries that we are looking at to be the next possible countries to normalize relations with Israel, were their incredible moments for the country, for the region, and in Israel's history. And of course, the celebrations continued here in Israel, where despite we are heading into lockdown because of the coronavirus, we still took the time. The municipal buildings in Tel Aviv and the walls of the old city in Jerusalem to light up in celebration of peace. As we say in Israel, it's not official until the Tel Aviv municipal building has lit up. So we really in an incredible spirit of festive goodwill permeating Israel today. But what has the reaction of the Palestinians been? Sadly, last night, during the signing of these accords, rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel as far in as the cities of Ashdod and Ashkelon. At least 6 people were injured as a result of rocket attacks. Iron Dome interceptors intercepted several rockets, and others fell in empty fields. The rocket attacks also continued in the early hours of this morning on the town of Sderot and surrounds, and the IDF has struck targets in the Strip in response to these attacks. And it just shows you the attitude that Hamas and other terror groups have towards peace, and this has been noted by those signatories to the peace accords. In fact, Israel basically lambasted the terror entities in the Gaza Strip, but it was also acknowledged by the Bahrainis and the Emiratis, who saw this as an insult to moving ahead for peace. And in our last story of the day, yes, we know that Israel is headed into a mandatory full 3-week lockdown, total lockdown. However, a minister has said earlier today that while the final rules of this lockdown are still to be released, one thing we've learned from the previous long lockdown is the effect that these lockdowns have on people's mental health. And playgrounds and outdoor gyms will remain open for people to get out for a little bit of fresh air and a little bit of exercise, albeit within the 500-meter distance restriction. And unfortunately, Israel's infection rate is well over the 5,000 infection mark today, reaching nearly 5,500. And as we head into this lockdown period, schools have already been closed to try and stem more infections taking place. So those are the top stories making headlines today. This is the Israel Brief. I'm Rolene Marks, and just a reminder that you can check out our content online at www.layoftheland.online. You can read my article on the execution by the Iranian regime of champion wrestler Navid Afkari, a tragic and gross violation of human rights. And don't forget to check out our Facebook page. Our community there is growing. We are headed to the 2,000 target, and we would love you to be a part of it. So if you're there, click on like or follow and share our content. And don't forget to click on the big red subscribe button on our YouTube channel at The Israel Brief, and interact and follow us on Twitter at The Israel Brief with the digit 5. So I'm going to end off like I began, with salam, peace, shalom, and we'll chat again tomorrow.